Hi, guys. Welcome back to Enlightened Awakening, episode number 12. So, today on the show, I have Sunshine. Sunshine is a psychic medium, a soul healer, spiritual advisor, high priestess, Reiki master, recovering alcoholic, and readings. Welcome, Sunshine.
Hey, thanks, Shauna. I appreciate being here.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on the show. So, tell us a little bit about who you are and what led you on the path to be a sober witch.
Who I am? Well, I'm still trying to figure that out. I think it's
Just a little.
I think that's a lifelong discovery. But
Yeah.
what led me down the path of becoming a sober witch? I think is a little bit easier to explain.
Okay, let's go with that.
Um, I have, from a witch's perspective, I've identified as a witch since I was around the age of 16. But from the ages of 16 until 40, I'd like to say that I kind of described it as a triage witch, right? Like I'd pull out my witchcraft or I'd pull out my spell work as needed, so to speak. I might need a spell. I might want to try to bring something forward. I really wasn't living it as like my own kind of life, philosophy and spiritual path. And around the age of 40, so I would have been
Whoa,
39.
you're over 40?
Yeah, I'm 45.
You look so young.
I know. It's a blessing nowadays. It was a curse when I was younger.
Right.
It's a blessing nowadays, but a curse when I was younger. Yeah. So the age of 39. Well, I should even say at the age of 37, my father found himself on his deathbed. He'd almost drank himself to death. And it was around that time that I really started to evaluate my own, and consider my own relationship with alcohol. But not in a serious fashion. And so we fast forward to 2019, and my cousin, who was a year younger than me, died from alcoholism. So he literally drank himself to death. And so I started to really give some thought and consideration to my own relationship, like on a serious note. And I started off, 2019, trying to do 90 days without a drink. And I reached probably around day 80, and I call it my drinking demon, convinced me that it was okay, right? Like it was okay to drink. And so I proceeded for, I think it was like 4.5 months to drink pretty much every single day until July of that year. I returned from 10 days on vacation, ended up at work on a Monday, and was literally going through detox, shaking, sweating, heart palpitating. And I walked into my therapist's office that night and burst into tears. And I said, I'm an alcoholic. And
so you were also admitting it to yourself at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
huge. And I wish I could say at that particular point that was it. But we go 60 something more days, and I'm on a plane to Costa Rica to celebrate my 40th birthday with my partner at the time, who was also an addict. But we never had a conversation around what was going to happen on vacation. And so we get off the plane in Costa Rica, and he walks straight into duty free and buys 2 half gallons, one of vodka and one of tequila. Right. My two favorite. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. Right. I had no plan. I was like, at this particular point, I'd been, quote unquote, raw dogging my sobriety, like thinking, right, like I was just going to be able to figure it out. And it was pretty hellacious. My 40th birthday, I hit my rock bottom. I had a private dinner. I had a dinner with a private chef that I only know I went to because I have photos, because I have no actual memory of it. And mind you, like I want to call out for a second, because I wasn't homeless. I had no jail time. There was none of these things that I think people will often associate with alcoholism or addiction, right? I had a high-paying corporate job. I was very well respected in my career. I was running the president of a nonprofit. I mean, all sorts of things. But behind the scenes, I was drinking on a very frequent basis, experiencing blackouts, feeling the physical effects of the alcoholism, and experiencing the emotional effects of the alcoholism, because anxiety was prevalent in my life like you couldn't even believe, like unbelievably so.
So
Um,
you were what they refer to as a functioning alcoholic, right?
yeah, I think a lot of people would refer to it as a functioning alcoholic, and I think that's a joke. I mean, what's functioning, right? The
Right.
fact that I got
Well,
up to work every day. You
yeah. I
understand?
mean, I just before I moved, I was in a 5.5 year relationship with an alcoholic who was a functioning alcoholic, went to
Yeah.
work every day and everything. And it took me a little bit to figure out what was going on. I'm like, why do you have to go straight home after work every day? Because people wanted to pop open a beer, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
I tried for so long I know I can't fix people, but I tried to encourage him, give him support, to try to get help. But you just can't until they're ready. And thank goodness I've never had an addiction like that, but I did used to be a smoker. And that was really hard. And I quit that. And so I
Well,
understand.
I'm also a former smoker, and that to me was harder to let go of than the alcohol. Yeah, that was harder to
Yeah,
let go of the alcohol, but the alcohol was destroying me more. If that
right.
makes sense, right? So the
Yeah.
physical addiction to the nicotine was more difficult, but the emotional, spiritual to the alcohol was bad. So yeah, I found myself at my rock bottom in Costa Rica. I described, I was the see you next Tuesday to my ex, like you wouldn't even believe. I mean, the things that I did to him on that vacation were horrific,
Oh,
horrific. And we got back into the States. And I was so overwhelmed with shame and guilt, and he said, the only way I'll fathom continuing in this relationship is if you go to AA and do 90 meetings in 90 days. And so horrified at that thought, but knowing at that moment I needed something else. Like it was obvious, twice, two relapses in that year. It was obvious my way wasn't working. It was not working, and
right.
so I found myself at the tables at AA. I did 90 meetings in 90 days, and it was rough. But around the end of that 90 days, the clouds started to part a little bit, and I started to ask myself, right? Because long answer to the question, how did I become a sober witch? I started to realize, like, all of these people would talk about the program being spiritual, but yet they didn't talk about the same spirituality I was familiar with, right? And being a
Mm.
witch. And I remember I'm a bit of a heretic. I love to ruffle some feathers every now and again. And I can
You
remember,
have Uranus in your chart, like
yeah,
me.
yeah. I remember sitting in there, and like I remember this one meeting, just we're all talking, and we're talking about like I think like our third step prayer, the third step. And I was like, my higher powers, my higher powers. Somebody pulls me aside afterwards, and they're like, hey, by the way, I just wanted to say, like, you kept saying higher powers, and I just wanted to make sure that you weren't. And I was like, no, I meant higher powers. I was like, I work with many gods, many goddesses, and angels, my spirit guides a lot. And they're like, oh. you know? And so
Right.
I did. I started to really the alcohol. I've realized now in retrospect that a lot of the alcohol was used throughout much of my lifetime to dampen these gifts, to dampen all of the experiences that I have now come to rely upon, appreciate, respect, admire, and really like take a lot of, find a lot of love for myself because I have them. Yeah. So I stepped into, I stepped in and embraced my own, witchy self, my spiritual path of being a witch pretty hardcore the moment I stepped into recovery. I may have been cloudy in the beginning, but yeah, I mean, I'm a sober witch through and through. And that is exactly what I'm here to do in life, is to continue to embrace that path and to help bring other people into their own path in the exact same way. Yeah.
Yes, and that was I'm glad that you took a lot of time to lay all that out because that helps folks understand how you can help them when they
Mhm.
do wanna reach out. So, I was looking at all the different services that you have and, that's good. When you were talking about how you were using it, you realized it was masking your gifts, and you might have subconsciously been using it to mask your gifts. That just reminded me of remember before the show, I was telling you about my dark night of the soul and things that happened. I didn't realize what was going on at the time. Well, I had this friend that worked with me and I would give him rides home and stuff and he was sitting in my house at one point and in instead of telling that whole story, I'm just going to do the overall description. I didn't realize at the time there were several things that happened and several things that were going on, and he knew not to use drugs around me, but he was using drugs, and I kept trying to tell him, "Look, like give him like motivation, inspiration to kind of." But in hindsight, it wasn't until many years later when learned some things and realized some things and looked back on that, I said, "Oh my gosh, he was a clairvoyant." And I bet you the whole reason he was doing that stuff was to dampen and silence his gifts.
Oh, you're spot on, and it's so it's wild because it's not really. I don't know so much about the clairvoyance that like that. I had no problem with. There are a number of different psychic abilities that the way that they show up, and I think the one that people try to dampen the most is going to be their clairsentience. Right. This is the same psychic abilities that people will start to identify as an empath. Right. So folks that have strong, empath tendencies tend to be very strong clairsentience. And that means headaches, that means feelings, being overwhelmed by energy, even being sound sensitive, right? So, like, the number one thing that I've realized in my own recovery is like, I don't go into crowds anymore. And, because all the times in the past, when I did it, it was because other people wanted me to. It wasn't because I wanted to. It wasn't because I enjoyed it. It's because somebody else wanted me to. So
Mhm.
I was literally, uh, violating myself over and over, my energetic self over and over for other people's happiness, right?
Right.
So clear sentience tends to be the number one thing that people try to drown out from an alcohol or a drug addiction, any type of addiction perspective. And the second one is going to be the clear audience, right? Hearing things. Right. And so
Mhm.
hearing things does not always sound like somebody's talking to you, like spirits talking to you.
Right.
It can also be uh, and this is the wildest one. It can be other people's thoughts.
Mm.
Yep.
Mm.
Clear audience. I'm a mind reader. And it's not a pleasant thing. People are like, oh, that's so cool. I'm like, no, try being in the company of a bunch of people that dislike you or dislike themselves, so they sit there and judge you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like there's nothing pleasant about it, right?
Right.
Try being in a relationship with somebody when you can hear everything that's going on in their head, and yet they don't want to talk about it. Yeah, good luck. Good
I
luck.
didn't know that about the thought thing. I think I'm, sentient and cognizant, and it's just like it's so hard because it's like, even when you know something, you can't say it because you have no proof, and it's like you're just like,
So
yeah.
that's why I tell folks that have that have strong clear cognition, I always try to train and mentor them to establish their clairvoyance or their clair audience. Because the
Mhm.
moment you can give a picture or give something that you say, like here, people are more likely to believe that than just a true download. Yep.
Yeah, there's this guy that I was referring to, he was clairvoyant for sure. He was I was sitting there talking to him in my living room at one point, and he's going like this. And I said, "What are you doing? Why do you keep doing that? Like, stop doing that." And he's like, "Do you really want me to tell you?" I'm like, "Yes, please tell me why you're doing that." And he goes, "You got these 3 guys standing behind you, like one over each shoulder, and they're like this.
Yeah.
And they're almost like daring somebody to mess." I was like, "Really?" I'm like, "Dude, that's like creepy." At the time, I didn't realize what was going on. It wasn't until years later when I learned what clairvoyant was, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, and there were many other."
Mhm.
instances I could tell you about. Oh my gosh. Oh, what a cutie
I
pie.
know. I know.
What's is it a boy or girl?
It's a girl. Her name is Izzy.
Oh, Izzy, she's so
Hmm.
cute.
I have
Oh,
5 of them, but she's the only one that'll hang out and climb on the desks with me. So, yeah,
oh, cats are so majestic. They're
I
so
adore them.
oh,
I
me
adore them.
too. Me too. They're very independent. They're very smart. They're just oh my gosh, and their little faces are adorable. Anyway,
Mhm.
but okay, so let's talk about some of the services that you have. You do something called a sober curious call. Tell us about
Mhm.
that.
I've had a handful of folks that reach out and they themselves, they're uncertain about their relationship with alcohol,
Mhm.
right? And we talked about that functioning alcoholic. There's a lot of people that they feel like something's off. They feel like there's something kind of like not quite, right. They're curious if it is the alcohol or if it is an addiction, right? And so I do offer, a quick chat to be able to talk, or even email. That's tends to be a big way. It's amusing to me how people will hesitate to talk one on one, but they'll sit there and
Mhm.
email me for like weeks
Right.
about
Maybe
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, I
they're
mean,
just
it's a. I mean, you're putting yourself in a vulnerable space, and until they're ready to look at themselves in the mirror, sometimes they'll hide behind an email address, right? I mean, that's okay.
right.
It's all right.
Yeah, so that's kind of like a discovery thing, not so much for you, more so for them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, and you have, an app called Sober Witch. What's that about?
So I have the only app built both on iOS and Android specifically for witches in recovery. So it's called Sober Witch Life. You can actually we just released the website, so I don't even think that we got this information over to you, but soberwitch.life. Really, if you go
Oh,
to that website, it'll allow you to download on either one of the Android or iOS. And in the app itself, there is the Sober Witches Toolkit, which is absolutely free. It includes a rewrite to the 13 steps, the witch's 13 steps to recovery. So I take a really deep, hard look at the 12-step program and have revised and recreated them so they align to the path of the witch. There's the sober witch's philosophy. So my own belief is that a witch is really an individual that has a strong connection to their psychic abilities, magical ritual or spell crafting, and also has a calling to heal. Right? That's my
yeah, I was
belief.
gonna ask you, let's define what a witch is so
Yeah.
people are
Yeah, there is the frequency of acceptance in there, the witch's promises, these serenity prayers that comes to, as it's related to the witch, as well as access to, I host a free recovery circle every week.
oh,
So,
like on
yep,
Zoom or something?
yep, we do it
Nice.
on Zoom. And so all of that's available completely for free. That's directly in the app.
Aw.
So it's a beautiful thing. I get, it's like I get some people that, I offer things for pay too. This is my mission in life. Like
Mhm.
this is what I'm here to do. And I wish I was just independently wealthy. I wish that I
Right.
didn't have to charge anybody for anything. But
Yeah,
that's not the case. I have a roof over my head and, food, and there are expenses to run and operate anything of this nature.
right.
So there are things that I offer, at pay, but being able to offer all of that completely free um, feels like such a blessing to me. A
Yes,
blessing.
yes, yes. So, witches, I think, well, we know witches have always gotten a bad rap, and I don't think that they are what people have been programmed to believe that they are. I feel like I'll tell you my definition, and then you tell me if you are like in
Yeah.
line with that. I feel like they were mainly spiritual people who were in touch with their spirituality. They understood Mother Nature and the different plants that they could, plant medicines and things like that, much like the Indians did. They love cats. they, they would usually, like, live away from, like live out in Mother Nature and things like that. And I feel like they got a bad rap from people who didn't want other people to be so independent and in touch with their spirituality, because they wanted to exert control over them. And if they were, in touch with their spirituality, then they're a lot harder to control, and therefore they got a bad rap. I feel like that's kind of
You know,
why.
I would agree that's a big reason as to why. You had organized religion that had a very patriarchal rule, right? And fear and control became a part of of that path. There's a really lovely book by the author's name's Pam Grossman, called Waking the Witch. And it does this beautiful exploration around kind of like that feminine power in the witch throughout history. And so if you are interested, highly recommend that book. Highly recommend that book, and for any of your listeners. But she goes
Yeah.
through and she talks a lot about that. And even when I've sat and I talk to my guides and spirit and the universe all the time, and we've been given a bad rap, but because so much of what we do is not understood,
Right.
right? You think about having psychic abilities, right? That we've been talking about, and like, how do you explain that until somebody is willing to, or has their own experiences? And psychic abilities are a feminine, a dominant feminine energetic. And so men
Mhm.
can have them, but until a man is willing to like truly lean into their own feminine energetic, they're not going to be as likely to exhibit or experience, their own natural psychic abilities, right?
And
So
some
for
people
all,
may even have them, but just are not defining them as that. "Oh, that was God talking to me." How do you know?
yeah,
You know? How
I,
do you know
I,
it wasn't Aunt Martha or, your higher self or something? You know what I mean?
I tell people all the time, my belief is every single one of us has these abilities. We don't often know how to recognize them. And if you don't know how to recognize them, you're not going to understand that you're using them or know how to use them actively, right?
Correct.
That's
Yes.
that's just the truth.
Mhm.
Um,
Like, if nobody taught you how to read, how would you know you could do it?
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
How would you know that's what it was?
Right.
If nobody ever said, "Hey, hey, you're reading," you just be like, "I'm what?" Right?
Right. Right.
What?
Exactly.
Yeah. So no, it's so I think the witch has been given a bad rap because much of what we do is not understood. And a lot of people have not taken the time to seek to understand it. You have a lot of mystics, though. There's a lot of
Mhm.
mystics throughout the ages. And once upon a time, I also have this belief that the way that men, or a lot of masculine energy, dominant energy people, they started to go down the path of like the alchemists and the magicians, right?
Like
And
Merlin.
yeah, yeah, there's so many you could go into and look. Once upon a time, I don't know if you've ever watched the TV show. It's on Netflix called The Discovery of Witches.
No, I
But
didn't
it,
know
it
about
goes it goes into some historical context too. But like even back with like Queen Elizabeth, she kept John Dee, who was a very famous alchemist, and in the occult world was known as a magician, right?
that.
And all he would have been is the same thing would have been he would have had the psychic abilities. He would have been practicing that. He would have been practicing magical spell work and ritual. The difference between a magician and a witch is I believe a witch has the desire or has a calling to heal. That's the only difference.
That makes sense with the herbs and stuff.
Herbs, energy healing, right? To prayer, incantation,
Crystals.
yeah, anything of that nature. Yeah, there's all
Yeah.
sorts of things that you can leverage and use from a healing perspective. But yeah, that to
When
me is the
you
biggest
have
difference.
And I think that it's a lot more similar than people realize. When you have some religious leaders who will say a prayer over someone who is sick, isn't that sort of like casting a spell? I mean,
Oh
it's the
my,
same thing.
I so I'm often identified as a ritual witch. Like if I had to tell the type of witch that I'm a gray eclectic ritual witch, right?
Mhm.
Gray meaning I white or dark does not matter. There's a time and a purpose for everything. Eclectic,
Mhm.
I pull my beliefs from every possible thing that you could imagine. It does not matter. And
Oh, okay.
ritual,
So eclectic encircles everything pretty much.
eclectic, yeah, meaning I can pull things from Hinduism, from Egyptian mythology, from Norse traditions to indigenous, like it doesn't matter. Like if my intuition pulls to it, that's what I use. And by ritual, meaning it literally, I believe in ritual. I believe in the practice of like a habit that is continuously done. I was raised Catholic. If you have ever been to a Catholic mass, I mean, goodness
It's
gracious,
ritual.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's procession, they're taking the gifts up, they're blessing the body and blood, you're walking up it. I'm like,
Even
oh
Joe
my,
Rogan was talking about what are they burning? What is that smoke incense stuff that they're wafting
oh,
through the aisles? Like, what is
it's
that? I
yeah,
don't know.
frankincense and myrrh. It's the same thing that you would burn at, that's the same thing burnt in a magician's or a witch's ritual. Yeah.
Right, 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 right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Mm. Okay, so what is a recovery psychic reading?
Mm. So I work with individuals that are in recovery. And so that recovery psychic reading is the reality when we've stepped into recovery, especially if we're newer, right? We're 1, 2, 3 years in. There may be things that we need to look out for within our life that has the potential to lead us closer towards a relapse, not a relapse, but closer. And so,
Mhm.
psychic recovery reading, we're going to go ahead and look at and see any type of pitfalls that you might need to be aware of that could take you down that path of being closer
Mhm.
to like a relapse. And relapse is not always picking up an alcoholic drink or using your drug of choice. Relapse can also be relapsing to the same behaviors that are
Mhm.
associated to being an addict. So, for me personally, I'll give you an example. One of my symptoms of addiction is a compulsion to control my environment around me. So the moment I start finding that I want to nitpick other people's behaviors and tell them that they need to do things this way or that way or anything, that is me closer to a relapse.
Ooh, and
Mhm.
probably stems somewhat from childhood trauma as well, right?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah,
Very much
because
so.
you're just like you were unsure of your environment a lot, so you need to make sure that you have it. Yeah.
Yep. Very much so. Right. As I said, I was raised in an alcoholic household. Right. So these things go hand in hand. It's not uncommon. There are statistics that say 40 to 60% of addiction is genetic and 40 to 60% of it is environmental. So
Mhm.
if you grow up with an alcoholic parent, you are so like,
Prone.
yeah, the cards are stacked against you. They are stacked against you. It's not being, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. That is being realistic though.
You're
I'm
just
saying,
raising awareness.
yeah, you need to be very conscious and aware. And addiction does
Mhm.
not always show up in the consumption of alcohol or drugs. Addiction can, so when I pray for folks that are suffering from addiction, I pray for those that are suffering from addiction, whether it is drugs, alcohol, sex, chaos, violence, drama, shopping, food, sugar, right?
Ooh,
Think
yeah.
about people in your life that are addicted to chaos or drama, right? There's always shit going on in their life. Everything's always a big deal, right? That's an addiction. They're addicted to the energetic current of chaos. Yeah,
'Cause probably feels like home to
it
them.
absolutely does. Yeah.
Mm.
And a lot of people would, you brought up the trauma thing, and a lot of those folks are going to have those traumatic childhood experiences, but the reality is they're addicted to it.
So you have to do the shadow work
Yep, you've got to do the
and
shadow work for
clear
it.
it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Wait, we just did the recovery psychic reading. Past life soul healing. Look, see how I always have this like dark eyeliner around my eyes? I think that and my fascination with cats, all cats in the cat family, from tigers on down to house cats. All right. I just love them. I feel like it's probably safe to say I had at least one, if not more, past lives in ancient Egypt.
I think a lot of us do go back into those time frames. A lot
Yeah,
of us that
they
have
were around for a long, long, long,
they
long time.
were.
And you know what I
And
found out not too long ago? The reason they used to wear the eyeliner around their eyes like that? It wasn't for cosmetics and for the way that it looks. Do you know why it was?
I've heard it before, but I can't come to it doesn't come to mind. So
I thought this was fascinating. Well, it was a medicine that they put around their
yes,
eyes to keep the gnats out.
yes, yes.
And the same
Yeah.
thing with all the jewelry and the gold and stuff that they wore. It had like energetic properties, and there were reasons why they were wearing the things that they were wearing. And here we're just doing it because we think it looks cool.
I know. Yeah.
Right.
So a past life soul healing, my belief is that we may go through and do work, shadow work from this lifetime perspective. But if we have things from an ancestral perspective, a generational perspective, or a past life, whether this is contracts that we've done in a past life, or even suffered from addiction in a past life, we may do work here and now and today, but there may be things in our soul's energetic that are still influencing us. So one of my favorite, I mean, the amount that I learn when I do past life is like fascinating, right? I mean, I have proven it so many times because I will literally go, okay, where are we at time frame? Okay, we're at like 1100 BC. Okay, where are we at on the map? They'll show me on the map. Okay, now and I will go be able to Google and find the exact like I can validate, right, what I'm told. And I'm not a history person. Like, this isn't history. This is so what I will do in those sessions is we'll go in and we'll do an Akashic record session and identify like what area of a past life potentially may be contributing to some type of behavior, experience, or situation in this particular lifetime. And as a Reiki master, I'll go in and do the energetic healing. We'll cut contracts, we'll
Mm.
repair souls, we'll pull it all the way through multiple lifetimes if necessary. I rely upon, I work with the Ascended Master, Saint Germain, for a lot of my healing work. He showed up during my final Reiki level 3 attunement and told me that anytime needed, he will work directly through me. And so we go and we do the soul healing, right? And so from an addiction and a recovery perspective, this is very, very beneficial for people who they know that something's not right, but they're doing all the right things. Right? They're doing the meetings, but they can't overcome this behavior. They can't overcome this thing. They can't let go. They can't surrender. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone in and we've identified some traumatic experience in a past life that is still left an imprint, and we'll do the healing. And the amount that's been able to shift and change within people, I'm still to this day in awe when people come back to me, right? Just the amount of response and shifts and changes that they feel are pretty incredible.
Wow. So it would probably be safe to say that if you don't clear an energy or fulfill a soul contract of something that you wanted to learn or experience, that it will just carry over from lifetime to lifetime.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm. What about generational? I heard that again last night, that like things are passed down from generation to generation from our family lines in our cells and stuff.
Some research that starts to show that and can exhibit that, studies that they've done over the course of the last 100 years of people. But I want to go back and we talk about those of us that I've had this conversation with a handful of folks. We go 300 years ago. Some of us, our ancestors, didn't live on this continent, and they would have traveled through very horrific very horrific, circumstances to be able to get over here, being ripped from their like land that they may have been on for generations, right? That in itself has left a generational impact. And then you talk about World War I, World War II. I mean,
Mm,
just things that we can talk about in our recent history, let alone the histories before that of the plagues and the things of that nature. And these things, they absolutely do. They imprint themselves in the genetic DNA, but also in the kind of like the soul's experience, right? That soul holds on to it as well. And so if there things aren't released, right? If things aren't let go of, if people can't surrender from their past, I had a really talk about. I've believed ever since I was younger that my family had been cursed, right? That my mom's side of the
oh,
family had been cursed. We'll talk about a really wild thing when I do a past life regression on myself, and I realized it was me that cursed my family.
from saying that? Oh.
No, from many lifetimes ago,
Oh.
I placed a curse, and because of that, I was reincarnated into that family.
Oh. So you placed a curse on your family, but you weren't in the family at that time.
Mhm.
Oh.
Yeah, that's
Oh.
why even though I'm a gray witch, I'm very particular about any type of dark magic that I do. Right, very
Right.
particular because it can have repercussions to it, whether you believe it or not. The soul can hold on to things that we don't realize, we don't have the intention for it to hold on to,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
It just can happen. So yeah, it was that was wild. So yeah, generational things can impact. So this can do both. We can do past lives, right? And we can also look at it from a generational perspective. The Akashic records, if I don't know if you're familiar with it or if your
Mhm.
listeners would be, but the Akashic records is a belief that every single soul has a written record of its past, present, and future. I always like to think of this as like a gigantic choose your own adventure book.
Oh, okay.
So all of the paths. So every time I have a reading, every time I look at things, I can ask them to show me paths. I can ask them to show me what the probability of somebody going down a particular path is. I can show me how many of these paths are, on a high vibrational versus a low vibrational path. And it's vice versa. You can go backwards and look at the same.
So my daughter, after my mom passed, my daughter told me one day, she's like, "Mommy, I had a dream about Gamma." That's what they called her, Gamma. And I said, "Well, tell me about it. What was it about?" She goes, "She didn't see me. I was in this big giant library, and it's like there were books like going way high, like all over the place. And she was sitting at this table, like looking through this book." And she's like, I was like kind of peeking around the corner, and she was like going through this. So it was very shortly after she passed. And I was like,
Woo!
"Oh, that's
She was
wild."
she was in her library. Yeah,
That's what I told her. I said, "You were in the Akashic records." She was looking at in the Akashic records. Like, where did I
yep.
go wrong? What could I have done?
Oh, absolutely, 100%, 100%. And uh, for your daughter to have stepped in there, I don't know if she's ever chosen to go look. She probably can access the records pretty easily herself.
Yeah, she's my middle one. The one
Mm-hmm.
I told you about that has all the crystals and stuff like
Yep.
that. Yeah, she's like very, very, very in tune to that stuff. So, okay, tell us about your addiction demon painting.
Mm.
And then I have a similar story, sort of similar.
Yeah, this is my partner, the gentleman. Him and I have been together for just over 3 years. He's also in recovery. He's a recovering alcoholic as well.
Mhm.
And we met when we were both like in recovery, and it was one of the things that connected us, and it was probably a couple of months, maybe 2 or 3 months in, and we got to talking about our recovery journeys. And interestingly enough, both of us had a number of relapses, but one of the things that we attributed to our ability to stay in recovery was we personified uh, our drinking demon. We could literally see and visualize our drinking demon. And so uh, I have, at this point now, as I've worked more and more folks that have suffered from addictions and things of that nature, this is for people that when I see relapse, constant, consistent relapses, If I look into their energetic, they typically have a entity attached.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Mm.
so this is going in, right? Leveraging the mediumship abilities, taking a look at it, leveraging the healing abilities, my abilities as a witch. And so I myself will actually pull the energetic and the attachment off, and my partner will paint it and bind it into a painting.
Mm.
So
And I'll tell you,
he
go
puts it
ahead.
into the painting, and then it's given to whoever we're working with, and it's up to them to choose what they do with it. And I've had some people have kept it. They actually display it as a form of, awareness, conscious awareness of that, addiction demon. Other people have chosen to burn it because they've been ready to let go, and they feel like they're ready, to kind of dissolve it. But at that particular point, it's pulled, it's detached, and it's actually bound into the painting itself. Yeah.
Wow. So they bind it kind of like wrapping it like a mummy.
Not from that. You
That's
can think
kind
of
of
it
what I
just
saw in my head.
as an energetic bind, right? So if you think about the paint as being the wrapping of the mummy, so to speak, right? So as he's painting, he's actually putting it in and putting it
Like
like,
trapping it in the painting.
yep,
Yeah. So my oldest, when she was little, she was having these nightmares, and took her to a counselor, and the counselor, she was only 6 at the time. And the counselor was like, draw me a picture of this monster in your dream. She was having these nightmares that there was a monster in the house, and that the house was all ripped up, and the scratches on the walls and all kinds of furniture every turn. It was just like a big giant mess, right? And so she said, draw us a picture of it. So she drew a picture, and I'm sitting there, watching. I'm like, ooh, And then she said, okay, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to take that picture, I want you to fold it, and I want you to rip it in pieces. Rip it on pieces. She had her rip it in pieces. She had her throw it on the ground and stomp on it. And then we took it and she threw it in the trash can. And after that, surprisingly, she never had another nightmare about that monster.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of
No,
like
I
the
mean,
same thing.
it's not kind of. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And what a beautiful thing for that, therapist to have recognized. And I have. It's interesting. I'll just share this. Like, there are more closet witches and therapists than I think the world realizes. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, yes. I agree 100%. So, okay, we covered what you do with the painting afterwards. Do you do tarot readings?
I do tarot readings, but my psychic abilities are, I typically lean towards them before I pick up tarot cards.
Lean towards what?
Right? My just
Before
using my psychic abilities.
Oh,
So
okay.
like I get enough picture, I get enough auditory, I get enough, sentient, I'll get downloads. And so if I'm going to sit down and do a session with someone, I'm going to try that path. And the way that I use tarot as a tool, meaning it's most
Mhm.
beneficial for me when I'm working with a client, when the client has two paths that they want to review. They've got a job that they're considering. They're trying to figure out if they're going to break up with their partner. Like, and so we'll look at the energetic in each path, right? That particular way using the cards. But for the most part, like when people sit down with me, because I work fairs, like tomorrow I'll be at a fair for 6 hours. Um, and when they sit down with me and they want, hey, I want a reading, it's very rare that I will pull the cards out first. I will basically look at, so psychic readings go into usually one of three categories: love and relationships, money and career, or health. And health, I always break into mind, body, and spirit. And so I'll look into all of those, and I'll ask for my guides, tell me about the general sentiment of what they need to know right now. They'll give me a general sentiment of what they need to know, and then we'll apply that general sentiment into each of those areas. If they want one area, like, oh, I've got a new job, then I'll go deeper just into that one. But I typically touch on all, right? Because it's so rare that one thing in our life is not somehow impacted by other areas of our lives. Even like our job and our career can be impacted by the relationships that we have around us.
Yes, yes, yes. I was at a music festival one time with my oldest daughter, and this is really weird. It still freaks me out to this day. Um, there was like a table where they were doing like tarot card readings and palm readings and stuff like that. Oh, there was another time I had a palm reading. But anyway, this young girl was doing the readings, and so it was my turn. So I sat down in front of her. Her mom comes up. I pretty sure it was her mom. Maybe she told me it was her mom. Comes up behind her, puts her hand on her shoulder, and she was looking at me like this. And she puts her hand on her shoulder. She's like, I got this one. And I'm like, this is creepy. you know? And she sat down, and I don't remember everything that she was saying, but she told me she could see my aura. Do you see auras?
Hmm.
Okay. She said it was like two colors, gold and like a teal, blue, green color. Like, what do those colors mean?
Did she say they were around anything in particular?
She said, no, she just said they were my aura. And I asked her, I was like, really? What color are they?
Yeah, our aura is not static, right? So our aura is kind of like always shifting and flowing at any particular given time, depending upon when it's looked at. And teals or greens, like blues and greens, that's all going to be around our throat chakra and our heart chakra, right? And
Okay.
so it depending upon what you were doing at that particular time, you very well may have been speaking up for yourself more often. You may have been seeking the truth, right? Not like both within yourself as well as from other people. And that
Mhm.
gold, to me, that's all crown related. And so that's probably saying that you are also being guided by your own spirit guides, your, you know, the ascended masters or anything of that nature on that journey at that particular time.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Wow. Okay, what kind of experiences have you had? Do you have any really cool stories? And I think that you said you had some out of body experiences. We know that you have some medium gifts, right? Messages, sightings.
Gosh, you know, nobody's ever asked for like specifics on those. I'm trying to think of something that's um maybe even recent. I mean, I've had all sorts of various different things. One that comes to mind, you know, this one, this was probably some of the weirder stuff that has happened to me. You know, obviously, if we do the correlation, I stepped into my recovery October of 2019, and so 6 months later, the pandemic happened and the world shut down.
Right.
And thank the goddess that happened, because I don't think I would have survived the pandemic if I was still drinking. Um,
Right.
yeah, the
Yeah.
universe takes care of us in ways we never realize. Uh, but about a year or so into that, maybe a year and a half, I mean, I did. I wasn't out a lot. I wasn't out and about in a lot of places. And so the first time I took a road trip, I was driving from Michigan over to the East Coast. And we're driving through Pennsylvania, and it was around dusk, and my partner was kind of snoozing in the seat next to me. And all of a sudden, I watch like the whole area like clears, or like all of the land, and I can start to see like war, like battlegrounds and like cannons and like horses and people fighting. And I was just like, that was really weird. I was just like, this is odd. Okay. And so we get to a motel because we're stopping just around like probably like an hour after this. And the next morning we wake up and we're hanging around this little town before we get back on the road. And we stop in an antique store, and we get to chatting with the owner of the antique store. And I share this story, and they go, how far were you? And I said, about maybe 45 minutes to an hour just west of here. And they go, that was where, I don't remember what the battle is, but the Battle of something. Like
So
literally,
was it Civil War, do you know, or was it like the
I
war with
think
the
it would have been,
British?
I think it would have been the French and Indian War. I think is what they said
Okay.
was the French and Indian War. And so
Mm.
that was really wild. The same trip we go, mind you, this is the first time, like I said, I've been out and about in this level in like years. And so, same trip, we're driving through Rhode Island. I had a friend that lived in Rhode Island, and we're driving up this road. And once again, I watch everything clear, and it's completely destroyed, right? Like
Oh,
everything around me is destroyed. And so, we get to my friend's house, and I was like, hey, I got a like weird thing. And he goes, 40 years ago, that was the only time this area had been hit by a hurricane, and it wiped the entire area out.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's like been some of the weirder types of things. Like, and it's because a lot of times I have so much protection on, and the little agreement with my guides is like, don't surprise me.
Yes, yes. You were
Don't.
kind of relaxed though, and you were going into a new area and probably didn't have your shield up. I feel like what I could be wrong, but this is a really good theory that feels right to me. What a lot of people think are ghosts are actually, since I've been on this spiritual path, I've heard that when people have NDEs, they learn that there really is no such thing of time as time. Everything is happening all at once, all at the same time. And sometimes people may see into something else that's happening real time where
Well,
they think it's
there is absolutely the theory of everything happens all at once, right?
mhm.
And that can very well be the case. That we could be picking up something right here, right now. It could be a matter of in
Energy
that.
imprint too.
Yes, yes. Like from a paranormal, like investigator perspective, they would consider it the energetic imprint. Same thing as I was saying, like going through that time and seeing the devastation of the hurricane or vice versa. Yeah, like if everything happens all at once, all at the same time, is it not happening right here and now as we experience it? Yeah,
Right.
100%.
Right. So what would you call it when somebody gets feelings of specific buildings?
I mean, your clairsentient ability is going to be able to pick up on an energetic of any place that you're in, right? And so there's in the paranormal investigation kind of like field, there's something that they call stone tape theory, that if you have brick, mortar, stone, wood, anything from a natural element perspective, that they can hold energetic imprint of things that
Oh,
have happened. And so, of course, you walk into a building, you're going to be able to feel that building. I mean, I talk to buildings. I've had buildings talk to me. I've had anything that's ever had a name talk to me. I'll put it to you that way.
I've had 3 buildings specifically in my life. 2 of them had a very like it wanted to swallow me up, and I'm like, "I gotta get out of here," you know? And
Mm-hmm.
then another building had like a really happy, like celebratory, kind of fun, loving energy to it. And then also, my nephew's grandmother bought this historical house. It was actually the dairy farm for this mansion from hundreds of years ago that is actually like you can do tours of this mansion to this day.
Mm.
And my nephew's grandmother bought the dairy farm, and it was like in bad shape and everything, and they rebuilt it historically and restored it and stuff. And so when they were done, I was at my nephew's graduation party. She's like, "Would you like a tour of the house?" And I'm like, "Yes, please." So as I'm walking through it, it was really weird. I could almost felt like I was back when the house was like up and running back in its like heyday or whatever. And then the other
Mm-hmm.
half of me kind of felt like I was like in the here and now. It was so weird. It was like a while. I was just walking through like, whoa. They kept all the fireplaces that used to heat the place, the hearths, I
Oh
guess you would
yeah.
call them.
Oh
It
yeah.
was
No,
like,
I mean,
wow.
uh, I'm a fan of. There's a place also here right where I live called Greenfield Village that they moved a lot of old historic buildings in and recreated these and so that's always very fascinating to walk in and to feel those places. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's like the longer they've been standing, the more energy they can absorb
Mm-hmm.
and store. And it's just like, whoa. Yeah. Okay. So I heard when I was listening to one of your little podcast interviews or whatever, I say little because it was short, a lot shorter in time than mine usually are. But you saw an alien at one point.
Mm.
Tell us about that. I noticed it was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So I haven't done these in a while, but when a couple of years ago, I used to do once a month. I would call it like a psychic power hour, and I would sell 5 to 8 seats, and you could come on and ask me what on Zoom and ask me whatever questions you want. And so a lot of people would do this like every single month, and but this new person shows up and they're like, "Hey, I've got a really weird question," and I was like, "I love weird questions, go for it." And they're like, I kind of have this feeling that I have like an alien attached to me. And I look and all of a sudden I see them pop up and wave at me. And I was like, yeah, you do. Yep. Yes, you do. hmm hmm And so, longer story short, that particular, person, because we went into like why they had asked for the alien for help. Now, I have a theory that a lot of times when we pick up or feel alien energetic, it's actually our future selves coming
Oh,
back,
I've seen
right?
stuff in the sky, but I've never seen a being.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think, and so they are very prevalent. They're actually around us a lot more than you may realize. Their energetic imprint is a lot different. So until they show themselves, I don't pick them up as same as in like an angel or another entity or anything of that nature. So I'm not a big, I'm not their biggest fan because I can't register them in the same way. Right. I can't. So they always kind of shock me. But I have a couple of friends that are like, love them and work with them, and I always tell my friends, I'm like, please don't talk about them because they love to play games with me. Then they'll start showing up and waving and doing. I'm just like, oh gosh, really? Okay. Yep, here they go again. Yep, your aliens are here. Thank you.
My daughter told me one time, she's like, "Mom," like, her older sister and her both saw, like, "We saw this UFO in the sky," and I'm like, "Well, tell me about it. What happened?" She's like, "It was there, and all of a sudden, it kinda just, like, moved and disappeared." And she's like, "It didn't look like it took off, it just looked like it moved and disappeared." And I was
Yeah.
like, "I wonder if maybe it was interdimensional and just, like, went into another
I do think
dimension."
that's some of what it is as well. My partner and I have a fascination with paranormal and UFOs and all this kind of stuff. We've been actually watching on Netflix. They've got a show called Ancient Alien, I think right
Yes.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I know that you have to go soon, and I could talk to you for hours. Literally, love this episode. This was so much fun for me. Um, so if folks would like to get a hold of you, there are two websites that they can go to, and these websites and all these links are also in the description, guys. So you can go down in the show notes and just click right on them, and it'll take you right there. The sunshine readings, if you're looking for a reading, right?
Yeah.
And then Illuminated Unschool, is that where you have your services that helps folks with addiction?
Yeah, that's where so it's Illuminate the Unschool of Sober Witchcraft. So that is for folks that are in active recovery, identify as witches, and will increase and enhance all of that lovely work that you're doing in ways that you probably never could have imagined. So
But you don't have to be a witch to reach out, correct?
nope, nope,
Okay,
sure don't.
that's what I thought. Okay. And then the other one is all the sorry, technical difficulty. Okay. And on Instagram, you have a couple of places where they can go and look at posts and things like that. Two different Instagrams and two different Facebooks, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I have two questions that I like to ask all my guests at the end. And the first one is, what do you think is the meaning of life?
To live it.
To live it and experience it. I like
Mhm.
that. And the second one is, if you could leave our guests, our listeners and watchers with a piece of profound advice, potentially life changing, what would that be?
It kind of goes a little bit off of that one, and I love this. I've been asked this question all the time. Always make a choice. Always make a choice, right? You're going to be presented with so many things within your life, so many opportunities. Always make a choice. Don't ever remain in the place of stagnation, because part of living life is continuing to choose, new experiences, new ways, new everything. Always make a choice. Yeah.
Yes, that was my last relationship. I told him you're stagnant so many times. I'm like, dude, I cannot. You're holding me back if I keep staying with you like this.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and hang back afterwards and we'll have a little chat before we part ways. And we will see you next time. Bye, guys.